Hey, folks. Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast Livestream. Apologies, I'm a few minutes late here, but 3 minutes late here. It's 4:03 Eastern Time. Was tending to some family business real quick with the family, and I am here now, and I am very glad to be with you. Our second live stream of 2022, and man, we've got a lot to talk about. North Korea, remember them? They haven't gone anywhere. Kim Jong Un and his regime. We talked so much lately, obviously, about Iran. We've talked a lot about Iran in the past week. I know, I get it. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but I'm trying to bring you the inside story of one of the most pressing issues in the world today and how it impacts you. Iran certainly at the top of the list. There is no way around it, especially when it comes to threats to Israel, to the broader Middle East, to the Sunni Arab world as well, and of course to the United States. So we've been talking a lot of Iran over the past week, and now specific threats against Trump administration officials on American soil. We want to talk about that a bit. That's a major escalation, I think, when it comes to that Iran issue. Of course, we've also been talking about China and Taiwan. I did a fascinating interview in New York yesterday with General Jerry Boykin about that topic. More on that in a second. Also, Russia and Ukraine. 100,000 at least Russian troops massed on that Russia-Ukraine border right now. I talked to General Boykin about that as well yesterday. But North Korea, again, we're talking Iran, Russia, China, so much recently. Afghanistan, you could say. Even Kazakhstan was a big story, or has been a big story in the news over the past week. But Kim Jong Un says, remember me? He hasn't gone anywhere. The rotund ruler of North Korea, who President Trump referred to as Rocket Man. By the way, he's not so rotund lately. He has lost a great deal of weight. There was a lot of chatter about whether Kim Jong Un was sick. We don't know. We know there is sickness there mentally, for sure. We're not sure about physically, but recent photos show he has slimmed down a bit. But he is saying again, remember me, he is still very much a threat, a nuclear armed threat on the Korean Peninsula, up to his old tricks. We're going to get into that in a minute. We have question and answers coming at the end of this live stream today. Remember, we're going until 5 p.m. Eastern time, and maybe we'll go a few minutes over, of course, because I was a few minutes tardy today here on the live stream. But Q&A, final 15 minutes for sure. So I'm looking off screen right now because I'm looking at our live chat as it scrolls down on the screen in front of me. And just hello to everyone from around the world joining us again. Shalom from Norway. We have the UK with us. We have Kentucky with us right here in the United States. We have Africa, Asia, Europe, Middle East, around the world. Viewers joining us here once again on the Watchman Newscast live stream. What a blessing. I just love the opportunity that we have here on the live stream to speak to people around the world. I've compared our live stream audiences to the sons of Issachar that First Chronicles talks about, a group of 200, the Bible says. In this case, we have thousands, literally, many more than 200, but 200 men, an elite group surrounding King David. The Bible says they knew the signs, they knew the times, and they knew what Israel should do about it. I compare our live stream viewers to those sons of Issachar, modern day sons and daughters of Issachar. We have Ireland, the Netherlands, all over the world, Australia, all over the world, UK with us. Welcome, everyone. God bless all of you. Happy New Year. Let's get into it. North Korea. I want to read directly from this Wall Street Journal piece. And I know a lot of people aren't fans of the Wall Street Journal. That's fine. But this is a straight news report, which I think is an interesting detail here about what happened today regarding North Korea. And again, I hope everyone likes the fact that we're following this North Korean issue. I know, of course, we focus mainly on the Middle East here on the Watchmen, and for good reason. But when China, Russia, North Korea, when things happen there, when things happen here domestically as well, we need to live up to our name as watchmen here on the newscast and report on that as well. And folks, it all kind of ties together at the end of the day, right? With these various bad actors and rogue regimes and terror groups around the world. And it seems that they all have links back to the Middle East, whether it's Russia, of course, which has a presence right now in Syria, whether it's China, which last year in 2021 Did you see this, by the way? Maybe we'll delve into this deeper in a future newscast. We did talk about it when it happened a few months ago, but China and Iran recently reached a 20-year deal, a 20-year agreement, cooperation agreement, where basically Iran provides China with cheap oil and gas, and China provides Iran with weapons and military know-how and hardware. That's kind of a big deal. Call me crazy, but there's always that link back to the Middle East, right? And of course, North Korea. We did a newscast, I believe, late last week about the relationship between North Korea and, you guessed it, the Iranian regime. So when we talk about these various rogue actors around the world, it seems like things always come back to the Middle East somehow. And that's certainly the case with North Korea as well, in terms of that, not only that relationship with Iran, but also this regime tried to help Syria and Bashar al-Assad build a nuclear reactor until in 2007, the Israel Defense Forces destroyed that Syrian nuclear reactor. Perhaps the Iranian regime should take note of that. Just saying. But let's get into the big news today on North Korea. And again, I hope that you are glad that we're covering this issue with the artist formerly known as Rocket Man, Kim Jong Un. Not to make light of it, it's a serious thing, but I always kind of laughed when when President Trump called him Rocket Man. But let's get into it, the real deal here seriously today. Kim Jong Un and the North Korean regime say that they have conducted their third hypersonic ballistic missile test. They said the test was conducted yesterday, Tuesday, January 11th. Why is this a big deal? First and foremost, what should you know about hypersonic missiles? We've talked about China and their hypersonic missile tests here on the newscast in recent months. Basically, a hypersonic missile travels, as you can tell by the name, hypersonic, travels at a very, very rapid clip, much faster than the average ballistic missile, and at a lower altitude. All of that combined, making a hypersonic missile harder to shoot down. In layman's terms, if you have a missile defense system, it is more difficult to shoot down and eliminate a hypersonic missile. And also, it can be mounted with a nuclear warhead. Hypersonic missiles are nuclear capable. China has tested them in recent months. Russia boasts on a frequent basis that they possess hypersonic missiles. The United States as well possesses hypersonic missiles. But now North Korea throwing its hat in the ring and saying, we also have hypersonic missiles. Let me quote directly from this Wall Street Journal piece, which I mentioned. North Korean leader Kim Jong Un attended his first weapons launch in nearly 2 years, observing what Pyongyang described as the final test of a new hypersonic missile that is a top priority for that regime. Sporting a leather jacket and peering through binoculars with that funny haircut as well, I'm sure, Mr. Kim watched a missile hit a target roughly 620 miles away. After making a, quote, glide jump flight and making a, quote, corkscrew maneuver, according to a state media report out of North Korea. His younger sister, Kim Yo-jong, who is the defense minister, I believe, in North Korea, was also present yesterday for this North Korean hypersonic missile test. They also conducted a test last week, which they said was a hypersonic missile test. They fired these ballistic missiles off of their east coast, folks, into the Sea of Japan. Now, look, take what the North Korean state media says with a grain of salt, you would say. But I will say, number one, certainly they've been working on the hypersonic missile test. So this very well may have been a hypersonic missile that was launched yesterday. Secondly, we know a test was absolutely conducted because the South Korean, Japanese, and U.S. militaries all said, yes, there was definitely a projectile fired from North Korea off its east coast into the sea. So there was a test, no doubt. And last week there was a test as well. And reportedly there were some 3 ballistic missile tests conducted in recent weeks by the North Korean regime of Kim Jong Un. So what are they up to here? Number one, this should alarm everyone. And again, we make jokes, Rocket Man, funny haircut. In all seriousness, this is a grave, grave threat to not only the stability of East Asia, the Korean Peninsula, but world stability. Why do I say that? The North Korean regime possesses, according to most accounts, at least 40 nuclear warheads. The big question is, do they have intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, that could deliver those warheads, in particular to the United States, perhaps the West Coast, God forbid, of the United States? Does North Korea have ICBMs? If this was indeed a hypersonic missile, a successful hypersonic missile test yesterday, again, they are capable of carrying a nuclear warhead, these particular hypersonic missiles that, and look, traveled 620 miles. That is a major upgrade for the North Korean military. And Kim Jong Un has said he is in the midst of a massive military upgrade and I guess a modernization effort for the North Korean war machine. This should be a major concern, folks. Once again, and I know people have a tendency to kind of laugh North Korea off and say, you know, it's the hermit kingdom. And what are they going to do? He's just kind of saber rattling to get attention. Yes, there is truth to that for sure. He has been largely ignored in recent months. What do we say at the top of this newscast? Iran, China, Russia, Afghanistan. The world's focus has not been on the Korean Peninsula, for sure. He doesn't like that. And one reason he doesn't like that is because his nation is obviously in complete tatters, thanks to the leadership of he and his predecessors, the tyrannical, wicked, insane regime, communist regime that has ruled that country with an iron fist now for decades and driven its own people into starvation and into gulags and death camps. Yes, today in 2022, happening in North Korea, he needs some assistance. How does he get assistance? We've talked a lot about this with Iran, right? With their nuclear program, the blackmail extortion strategy. This is so predictable, folks. And every time the West falls for it, Kim Jong Un is going to act up. He's going to fire some missiles and rockets and make a lot of threats. And you know what? He may even conduct a nuclear test. There have been at least 6 nuclear tests on his watch since 2012 when he came to power for his replacing his father who died. At least 6 nuclear missile tests, over 60, I think the number is 62 or 64 ballistic missile tests under Kim Jong Un. So he is going to make a lot of noise there on the Korean Peninsula and get the world's attention and say, if you don't give us financial relief and ease up on those international sanctions, there's no telling what we might do. This has been the MO of the North Korean regime over the past several decades. Again, it's a nation in tatters. It's hell on earth, quite literally, for the people who live there. And God forbid if you're a Christian who lives in North Korea and what you undergo there. The stories of North Korean believers, that small Christian minority that lives under literally hellish circumstances. All that to say, as Kim Jong Un continues to live in luxury, by the way, he and his regime and his family, he'll make noise from time to time to get attention, to get what he wants. And you would say, someone might say, well, okay, he wants financial aid and sanctions relief so he can feed his people. No. He wants financial aid and sanctions relief so he can feed his military and his war machine and build more nuclear weapons and more hypersonic missiles. That's where the money goes, folks. This is not brain surgery. We can look around the world stage, whether it's Iran, Gaza, when bad actors and terror regimes get that financial windfall, say in the case of Iran back in 2016, billions of dollars in sanctions relief, thanks to that disastrous 2015 Iran nuclear deal. When dictators get rewarded, basically, what do they do with the money? Do they use it to feed their people, to build schools and playgrounds and orphanages and hospitals? No. They use this financial windfall to destroy schools and playgrounds and hospitals and orphanages, say in Israel, in the case of Gaza and all the aid that's poured into there that Hamas has pocketed. It has not gone to the people of Gaza. It has gone to the terror rulers of Gaza. And they've used it to build rockets and bombs and terror tunnels. That's what happens in these cases. The Iranian regime, where did the money go? Towards the nuclear program, towards the ballistic missile program, into the pockets of Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, etc., etc. That's where the money goes. And guess what? The more sanctions are lifted against North Korea, it's not going to bring relief to the people of North Korea because the money will go to the regime. And the regime then won't turn around and use the money towards programs, towards feeding, quite literally, its people. Again, it will feed the war machine of North Korea. That's how this works, folks. And that's why Kim Jong Un is rattling his saber right now, one reason, but a very unpredictable character. To have nuclear weapons, and he knows this, and this is why he has them, gives him a degree of stability. Clearly deterrence against attack. If you want to attack North Korea, you have the very real possibility of it escalating into a nuclear showdown in some form or fashion. They have, again, at least 40 nuclear warheads. How deliverable are those warheads? Do they have the capability to deliver them, mount them on a missile and deliver them? We honestly don't know. The intelligence when it comes to North Korea is not very great. There's not a lot of intelligence assets on the ground. It's in many ways an impenetrable type nation, unlike any other nation in the world, really. That's why it's been called the Hermit Kingdom. He is certainly a wild card. Kim Jong Un, as was his father, as was his grandfather for sure, but especially this new leader and his sister as well, who is someone to watch, who also has that very wicked streak in her, according to reports, as does the entire family, it seems, and that communist, Stalinist, totalitarian dynasty that they have formed on the Korean Peninsula. So why should you care about North Korea and what happens there? Well, if they do indeed have the capability to deliver those missiles to points across the world, then everyone's on notice. But from a Middle East perspective as well, and again, we focus on the Middle East greatly here on the Watchman. It's our main focus because the Middle East never sleeps. And what happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East, as we've learned many, many times, the hard way, many times. North Korea and Iran have a very close relationship. I talked about this on the newscast last week. You can check it out here in our archives. And hey, if you have not subscribed to the newscast here on YouTube, please subscribe. I usually assume with the live stream that if you're with us here, our sons and daughters of Issachar here on the live stream, thousands of us here right now, actually, chatting here and talking together. This is awesome. I assume you've subscribed, but perhaps you haven't. This is your first time watching us. So, hey, join up with our team here. And this is a movement we have of watchmen and women on the wall for such a time as this. So that'd be great if you guys could join us and subscribe. But again, if you missed it last week, the Iran relationship, long story short, and it's a long running relationship. That's why I say that. We've had Iranian scientists present at North Korea, likely nuclear test, but certainly North Korean ballistic missile test. Iranian scientists have been there. I mentioned earlier, Kim Jong Un, or the regime of North Korea, his father, working to build a nuclear reactor in Syria, which the Israel Defense Forces eliminated, thankfully. But also Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. Remember him? The father of Iran's nuclear weapons program, who was also eliminated in November 2020 outside of Tehran in an Israeli strike. Fakhrizadeh visited North Korea to discuss ballistic missile and nuclear technology. Hey, look, that's the father of Iran's nuclear program, a major player in the Iranian regime, personally visiting North Korea to meet with North Korean leaders. That tells you the extent of this relationship. And here's a real wild card for you. We talk about North Korea being a wild card. What about North Korea? Say that these are indeed successful hypersonic missile tests that North Korea is conducting. What about North Korea passing off that hypersonic missile technology to Iran? Now, Iran clearly approaching the nuclear threshold and working diligently to acquire intercontinental ballistic missiles as well, ICBMs. The hypersonic capability, the Iranian regime would love that. They are nuclear capable, these hypersonic missiles. Again, key point here, they are very difficult to shoot down for missile defense systems, even though Israel has a very formidable missile defense system with Iron Dome, and Iron Dome would be more for short range rockets, but David Sling and the Arrow missile system. Hypersonic missiles are a different beast for sure. A very lethal weapon, could be nuclear tipped. And if North Korea says, hey, we have this technology and we are in the market to share it with our friends, folks, you can bet that the Iranian regime would be lining up. They'd be first in line and saying, hey, we'd love some of that hypersonic missile technology. So that is a nightmare scenario. What happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. I guess to an extent, we could also say what happens on the Korean Peninsula does not stay in the Korean Peninsula when it comes to the ultimate wild card, North Korea. Now, many have said over the years before, we're going to move on from North Korea here in a minute, but I wanted to say one more thing. And wow, we've got thousands of people with us now, a very lively and active chat going on right now. I'm just watching here on the side of my screen. I can see the live chat. Welcome, everyone. God bless everyone, and happy New Year. Last point about, wow, we have people from around the world with us. This is great. Okay. Last point about the North Korean regime. A lot of people have said, well, don't worry about North Korea because China and Russia will rein them in, especially their neighbor, China. They will rein North Korea in. They are the ultimate authority over the North Korean regime. To an extent, that's true, for sure. China has obviously serious leverage and influence over the North Korean regime and really helps keep that regime alive. And China doesn't want, obviously, a nuclear blow up, literally, right next door on its border. But by the same token, you get the sense that China and Russia kind of like this situation in that, and yes, I know the threat of a flood of North Korean refugees fleeing into China, and if the regime collapses, and I get all of that, but you would think at the end of the day, China and Russia kind of like the situation for a very simple fact that it makes things difficult for America and the West. Kim Jong Un is a thorn in the side of the United States, and his regime has been for decades. That is the bottom line. And this includes China and Russia and their relationship with Iran as well. Any nation, any player in the world that is a thorn in the side, a persistent headache for the United States and more broadly for Europe, for the West, for NATO, that makes China and Russia very happy. So that's the secret to the relationship. There really is no secret. Rogue regimes, which are anti-Western, are going to align with each other. And as long as it doesn't affect China and Russia to any great extent, obviously the security of those two nations, China and Russia are going to shrug, and they're going to allow Rocket Man to fire rockets into the sea and make noise and demand concessions from the United States. And China and Russia are going to like that. They like it when the United States is perhaps embarrassed and certainly irritated and inconvenienced, to put it mildly, by North Korea and by the Iranian regime. That's how it works. For anyone out there saying, ideologically, I don't understand how could Iran and North Korea work together? One is a Stalinist, communist, totalitarian dictatorship. The other is a radical Islamic dictatorship in Tehran. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. The old slogan, holds true today, that very tried and true adage, and it goes to the China, North Korea, and Russia, North Korea relationship as well. Someone just made a good point here. North Korea is the ultimate proxy for Russia and China, and Russia and China are proud of their achievement. Good point by John S. Smith on our chat here. Very good. Hey, that's a reminder, John. Good comment there. And that's a reminder to everyone. Questions coming up shortly. Q&A. We're going to close this thing out with Q&A shortly. But I hope everyone liked this I can't say it. Liked is probably not the proper word, right? I hope that you appreciated maybe the North Korean overview, because it's an issue that has not gotten the attention it deserves, hey, including from yours truly over the past few months. There have been other things on the front burner: Iran, China, Russia, and now North Korea, we see in 2022 is moving back to the front burner. 2022. A year in which the word acceleration comes to mind, especially the second half of 2022, to my mind, although that Russia situation and massing on the border with Ukraine and a potential invasion there, that could happen sooner rather than later. In terms of how things are shaping up right now, when you're massing some 100,000 troops on Ukraine's border, it may never happen. Perhaps it's all just a show of force by Russia. We all pray, I hope, I think, that it does not happen, an invasion of Ukraine. But I don't think anyone watching right now would be surprised if Russia were to move into Ukraine. I mentioned General Jerry Boykin. We talked about North Korea's military buildup, by the way. Before we get to Q&A, I want to talk about Israel's military buildup, which Prime Minister Naftali Bennett talked about this week. Some very interesting comments there. In a minute, we're going to talk about that. Before we do, real quick, China. I interviewed yesterday General Jerry Boykin. Anyone out there? Have you heard of General Boykin? Any General Boykin fans out there? He is a great American, to say the least. Executive Vice President of the Family Research Council in Washington, D.C., a 3-star general, founding member of Delta Force, former Undersecretary of Defense at the Pentagon. He is from Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Black Hawk Down in Somalia. He was there. He was involved in 1980 in the rescue attempt of the Iranian hostages. It was ultimately a failed attempt. No fault of his. But if anyone knows about the state of the military, the U.S. military, and the state of things in a geopolitical, geostrategic sense around the world, it is General Jerry Boykin. I interviewed him yesterday. You may have seen some of the pics of me in New York on Instagram. You can follow, by the way, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're all over social media. If you want to follow us in addition to YouTube, we're also posting there every day. I believe, let's see, Twitter and Facebook are at Erick Stakelbeck, Instagram, Erick.Stakelbeck. But we came from New York. We showed that. And General Boykin, I interviewed him about China, Russia, Iran, all of this. You can see it next Thursday night. I got to give this a little teaser so you all watch. I think you're going to like it. Next, again, maybe like is a strong word when you hear the topic. State of the Nation 2022, State of America 2022. It ain't good right now. That's what I mean about maybe not liking the state of things. But we do encourage you on this program, airing next Thursday night, January 20th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on TBN. So I don't know where you are in the world. If you're here in the States, watch it on TV. If you are, we have people all over the world. You can watch it online at tbn.org, I believe, and TBN On Demand. That's next Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. General Boykin will be there with us. And the state of things, not very good. But again, we do encourage. Where does encouragement come from? Where does your encourage come from? I know where mine comes from. His name is Jesus. He's the answer, and he has the answers for what's ailing a broken world right now. And we'll talk about that as well next week. Don't worry, you will not leave depressed after that show. But General Boykin said about China, I asked him, hey, after the Beijing Olympics, remember, folks, we're talking February, in a few weeks, the Olympics, the Winter Olympics kick off in Beijing, China. They're hosting them once again. What happens after that? What do I mean by that? Well, with Taiwan, China has been, I'll use the term again, saber rattling about Taiwan for years now. but certainly in the past several months in particular, and not only threatening over Taiwan, but threatening the United States for standing with Taiwan. So there has been a school of thought that, and rightfully so, when the Olympics are over, okay, China no longer has the world's eyes. It doesn't have to behave itself, basically. If it's hosting the Winter Olympics, it's going to try to be on its best behavior, you would think, for those few short weeks. But after that, when everything's packed up and everyone goes home, what does the communist regime in Beijing do then? Now, General Boykin seemed to think not this year with China and Taiwan. What do you think? Let me know what you think in the chats and your Q&A. He said, I would think it might be a little longer, but he said certainly next year, a 2-3 year window is not outside the realm of possibility for China moving against Taiwan. I know no one likes to hear that. I don't like to say that, but I think that is a plausible scenario, especially, again, China gets these Olympics out of the way, the world's attention on it, trying to be on their best behavior. The word, again, I've been thinking for 2022 is accelerate, folks. What do I mean by that? Iran, Russia, North Korea, China, they have plans. They are not good plans, not for their countries or for the surrounding countries or their adversaries, including the United States, where I'm sitting right now. But they do have plans, strategic, long-term and short-term goals. Perhaps Russia with Ukraine and the Baltic states as well. Perhaps Russia had a longer-term strategy to invade Ukraine. Perhaps China had a longer-term strategy to, God forbid, invade Taiwan. Perhaps North Korea, who knows what he's up to or what's going on inside that head, but perhaps it was a longer-term strategy. Perhaps Iran was thinking, okay, we're not going to break out to that nuclear threshold just yet. We're not going to activate, say, Hezbollah or our ring of fire, that surrounds Israel just yet. We're going to wait a few years. Is that all off the table now? I ask that, and I say acceleration. Are the bad guys, quote unquote, are they accelerating their devious plans right now because of weakness in Washington, D.C.? I said this week, when the leader of the free world is MIA, missing in action, the United States, when the leader is away, is MIA, the rogue regimes will play, I guess you could say. The Afghanistan effect, folks. How many times can we say it? What went down in August 2021 in Afghanistan, that disastrous, embarrassing U.S. withdrawal, the way it was handled by the administration in Washington, D.C., you couldn't think of a worse message to send to your enemies. It projected all sorts of weakness and disarray. It also projected disloyalty to allies. Not only did the enemies of America and the West and the free world get the memo, so to speak, so did the allies of the United States. Do you think South Korea wasn't watching what went down in Afghanistan very closely? Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, Europe, they were watching how that was handled. And it was not handled well. And now North Korea, Iran, China, Russia are kind of licking their chops and rubbing their hands. And they're saying, we were going to do X, Y, or Z in 3 years or 5 years. Now, maybe we accelerate these plans and do it in 3 months or 5 months or 3 weeks. Why? Because we do not fear the United States. We don't, and perhaps more importantly, we don't respect the United States. I think of A Bronx Tale. Would you rather be feared or respected? Great movie if you haven't seen A Bronx Tale. I don't know that we are either right now, sitting in the United States, feared or respected by our enemies. And that grieves me as a patriotic American who loves this country, but I have to call it like it is. This is no time to mince words. By the way, who has seen A Bronx Tale? Good flick. Coming from a Philly guy, so I can appreciate that kind of flick. But this is the situation we have right now. And until the Biden administration shows some real spine, I guess the word was, I don't know any other way to say it, and projects strength, then you will continue to have the bullies of the world push and prod and poke and test and see what they can get away with. And if there's no response, they're going to keep pushing, and they're going to laugh at the United States. And again, that grieves me to say that, but I'm calling it like it is. What can I say other than pray for this nation, the United States, and pray for this entire situation? That sounds almost simplistic, I know, but prayer works, man. And in this situation, it can work as well. Ultimately, and this is for a larger conversation, perhaps in our Q&A session, ultimately speaking, as an American who loves this country and as a follower of Jesus, we need a revival in this country. We need a turning back to God, a modern day great awakening. That's there's no political solutions here, folks. Everyone watching right now, commenting, love you all. God bless you all. There is no political solution to the problems that ail America right now. This is a spiritual battle at the end of the day. And unless this nation gets right with God once again, you could have the greatest political leader, man, that the world has ever seen, and he could help turn things around, but it might just be a short reprieve. And then we're back into trouble once again. I think of when God gave King Hezekiah, one of the good kings in Israel, God gave him that extra 15 years of life, remember? Gave him a reprieve, and it staved off the collapse that was coming. 15 more years, Israel got through Hezekiah. Ultimately, though, the collapse did come because the nation did not turn its hearts back to the Lord, to the God of Israel. So again, we could have a great political leader who helps turn things around in the natural. But once that leader's gone, if there is still moral rot in the nation and the nation has drifted from God, then the underlying problems aren't going to go away, and you will ultimately remain on the wrong course. I think we just saw that play out over the past few years, right? I think that's exactly what's been happening. A short reprieve, a short time to work in the light, and now we're back down a very dangerous road here in the United States. We got questions in 5 minutes. One more thing I wanted to mention, actually 3 minutes. We're getting to questions in 3 minutes. Time me with your stopwatch. One article I wanted to quote from for you. One thing I want to mention, and we can talk about in the Q&A. One thing I also want to mention, I think you'll get a kick out of, is humorous. Yes, we're talking ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles. We got some humor for you today, too. The one thing I wanted to mention, Naftali Bennett says Israel, and you may ask about this in the Q&A. I want to just throw it out there before we get to the questions. Naftali Bennett, the Israeli prime minister, says the Israeli military is undergoing its largest rearmament in years. He tells, on Monday, he told the Knesset's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee that obviously Iran remains Israel's most significant foe, that Israel is fighting Iranian forces constantly, and that Israel is undergoing a massive military buildup to prepare not only for a potential military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities and a potential war with Iran and its proxies, but Bennett said there is a very good chance that Israel may be facing a conflict with Gaza, i.e. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or Lebanon, i.e. Hezbollah, in the very near future. That's Naftali Bennett, Israel's prime minister, telling the Knesset Defense Committee, look, we may be going toe-to-toe with terror forces, Iran-backed terror forces in Gaza and or Lebanon soon. I told you 2022 was not going to be dull, folks, around the world, in America, and certainly not in the Middle East, the world's most chaotic, volatile, and strategic region. And Naftali Bennett seemed to confirm that with those comments. I thought that was very interesting. And Israel not only building up militarily and constantly drilling, but they are going to conduct drills this year as they're drawing up plans right now for a potential, keyword there, nothing guaranteed, but certainly a potential strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. In the spring, the Israel Defense Forces will be drilling for exactly that, for a potential strike against Iran. Second half of 2022 will be very eventful, I believe, and the first half won't be dull either, as you're learning already. One humorous thing to mention, we've got a list of your questions here. This will take me 1 minute, but you got to love this. Hamas, I'm trying to keep a straight face as I say this. This is across the wires today and yesterday. Hamas claimed that its naval commandos were, were attacked by a dolphin operative of the Israeli forces equipped with specialized combat gear. Did you say dolphin? No, a dolphin, like a dolphin, like in the sea, a dolphin. Israeli security forces used a dolphin to chase Hamas frogman commandos off the coast of the Gaza Strip, Hamas claimed on Monday, according to a report by Al-Quds, which is a Hamas media outlet. The Hamas naval operatives were chased into the sea by a dolphin equipped with a device capable of killing the terror group's frogmen, naval commandos, killer Zionist dolphins, according to this Hamas publication. Now, this comes on the heels of Hamas in previous years claiming that it captured an Israeli dolphin operative in 2015, and also over the years, Hamas suggesting that not Hamas, I'm sorry, in that case, it was radicals in Egypt said that sharks were in the Red Sea, were used by the Israeli Mossad to attack Egyptians. The Mossad controls the sharks too. And also in Saudi Arabia in 2011, authorities held a vulture in detention under suspicion that it was spying for Israel. And in Turkey, authorities in 2013 detained a suspected Israeli spy bird. I'm sorry. Folks, this isn't the Onion or the Babylon Bee or a satire website. This is real stuff in the Muslim world. Mossad sharks, Israeli Shin Bet dolphins, spy vultures, and Mossad birds. These are real reports in real Middle Eastern media. Someone said they call her Flipper. Someone commented there on the chat. Hey, we all need a laugh, right? And as serious as this is, you just got to laugh at that. How can you get into the minds of these people? The conspiratorial, paranoid, hateful nature of these people. There's a Zionist behind every rock, behind every tree. Even the animals in marine life are tools of the Zionists. It's all one big Zionist plot and conspiracy. This is what you have in Hamas, places like Hamas and Turkey and Iran, Hezbollah, sadly. But this was a serious, quote unquote, Hamas publication. Again, this was not satire. Poor dolphin, never had a choice, but just thought you'd enjoy that brief period of some humor here on the newscast. Let's get into questions. Okay. Pulling them up. Give me 1 second. I apologize. I'm just looking at my computer here, guys. Trying to find the questions. Let's see. Someone asked me about Isaiah 17. Just look at the chat as I pull up the questions too, but I just saw that in glancing an Isaiah 17 question. What does Isaiah 17 say? I don't have my Bible in front of me, and I should, but I'm going to paraphrase. Behold, Damascus will become a ruinous heap. It will cease to be a city. That's Isaiah 17:1. Okay, what does that mean? People every week on the live stream ask me about the destruction of Damascus and Isaiah 17. What does that mean? I think it means exactly what it says. And I just had lunch with a pastor friend today, and we discussed this. So it's fresh on my mind. So I'm glad that question came. I wanted to delve into this a bit. Damascus is one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world. It has never, ever been a ruinous heap. It has never ceased to be a city. Yeah, it's been ruined, and it's been hit very hard, including over the past decade, obviously, in the Syrian civil war, but it has never absolutely ceased to be a city. Even the Mongols, with all the devastation they wrought across the Middle East, they're still feeling the effects of it in Iraq and Baghdad today, what the Mongols did in the 13th century. But Damascus never completely destroyed. But the Bible seems to suggest in Isaiah 17, verse 1, that it will cease to be a city. There will no longer be a Damascus. It's not Erick saying that. That's the Bible saying it. I'm telling you what the Bible says. And a pastor friend and I talked about it today at lunch. How could this happen? It's going to happen. And I hate to say it, no one wants to see it happen, but the Bible says it's going to happen. I believe what the Bible says. I'm one of those crazy Bible thumpers, I guess you would say. Just kidding. But I'm one of those crazy people who actually believes the word of God and what it says prophetically. Imagine that. I know. You would think at first glance, well, it's going to be a military strike. Perhaps Bashar al-Assad, who is not the wisest of leaders, does something very foolish, and Israel responds with Damascus in its crosshairs. But my friend today said, maybe it's a natural disaster. Maybe there's an earthquake. I mean, it's a very seismic region, the Middle East, including Israel. Maybe there's an earthquake. I mean, there could be a lot of different ways that happens. I wish that this wouldn't happen, but it's the Bible's clear, folks, about Damascus and the future of that city in Isaiah 17, verse 1. So when the Bible says it's going to happen, it's going to happen. There is a 100% accuracy rate with Bible prophecy. As some as 30%, 40% of the word of God is prophecy. That's why it just makes me shake my head that churches do not teach prophecy today. But very seismic region. So that's something I hadn't thought a lot about. But, I was watching this week on I-24, the Israeli TV network. I get it here in the States on Comcast. And they had someone on, I guess he was a seismologist or some kind of scientist. He was an Israeli. And he said that Israel is due for a major earthquake. Now, that's interesting. When you think of, obviously, what the book of Revelation says about earthquakes, what Ezekiel 38 and 39, the book of Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39 say about a major earthquake during that Gog and Magog war. Israel, every 100 or 200 years, according to this expert on Israeli TV, is hit with a pretty major earthquake, a very seismic, very active seismic region. Gosh, what's the name? There's a name, the Africa fault line. Forgive me, I'm not a seismology expert, but I have been in many places in Israel that over the centuries have been affected by earthquakes, including Beit Shan. Does anyone out there know about Beit Shan? Comment if you've been to Beit Shan. Anyone who has visited Israel over the years. Beit Shan, an amazing place that was leveled by an earthquake, I believe in the 7th century. I think it was the 7th century. I filmed an entire Watchman TV show there at Beit Shan, and there was a major earthquake there. It's a fascinating thing, folks. There's actually it's pretty well preserved in Beit Shan. And again, if you've been there, there's ancient Roman pillars, or I guess there may have been Byzantine by that time, of course, that have been toppled, but they're still there, toppled from the earthquake well over 1,000 years ago, some 1,300 years ago. So, yeah, when you read about earthquakes in the Middle East, in the book of Revelation and in Ezekiel 38 and 39, I don't think it's a big coincidence that this is a very active region when it comes to earthquakes and seismic activity. All that to say, someone's writing in from Ben Salem, PA. Hey, Smitty, that sounds like a good Philly name. I grew up in Northeast Philly. Good to have you with us, man. Ben Salem's right across the border, right around the corner. But very interesting thing to consider when we talk about Isaiah 17, right? Someone writes here, move out of Damascus. It's probably wise advice. And you think of that city in the great history of Damascus, you think of the road to what do we think of as a believer? What do you think of first and foremost when it comes to Damascus? The road to Damascus and the Apostle Paul and his experience. Wow, we live in some times, folks, Bible times for sure. What else do we have here? Let's see. Someone says, Erick, my family is Northeast Philly. Amen. Good to hear. Sherry Connor, thanks for joining us. Let's see. What do we have here? Sorry, guys, as I'm looking for a question here. One second, I'm having trouble pulling my questions up. Forgive me, guys. Sorry for the delay here. Here's a good question from Jen Sorensen. Does Revelation events have to be in order chronologically? It is. And someone says they lived in North Philly. God bless you. I worked in North Philly at one time. Do the events of the book of Revelation have to be in chronological order? That's such a timely question because I've been reading through Revelation lately, and it kind of jumps around a bit, right? Obviously, it starts with Jesus is addressing the 7 churches of Revelation. And hey, what a beginning, right? I mean, the beginning of the book of Revelation, a lot of times it seems that people kind of pass by that and get right into the nitty gritty of the Antichrist, the 144,000, the mark of the beast, the war of Armageddon. But one of the reasons I wanted to reread the book of Revelation, and I read it pretty frequently. Over the years, I've read it many times, of course, but I definitely get to the book of Revelation a few times a year and review and compare to what's going on in the world right now. But the 7 churches, man, can you see these playing out today? You know, the Church of Philadelphia obviously is, hey, Philadelphia, I told you, it's a good place. But in all seriousness, the Church of Philadelphia, obviously one of the good ones among those 7 churches. But I want to read through that and just compare those various churches to the churches today. But Revelation, it seems to jump around a bit when you look in the book of Revelation. I don't know that that's exact. It doesn't seem to be there is a chronological order to the events, but the book of Revelation, obviously the end is the end. And after the 1,000-year reign and new heavens and new earth. So that's the end of the book of Revelation is in a chronological order. But there are other events in the book of Revelation that seem to jump around a bit. But you can pretty easily, I think, put the timeline together and the way things are going to go. But in terms of the seals being opened, obviously in order, but there are some things. When does the Antichrist rise? When do the 144,000 fan out? Those Israeli witnesses fan out across the world. So an interesting question that's been fresh on my mind as I'm reading and rereading the book of Revelation as well. Someone asked me, hi, Eric, what continent would be the safest during World War III? I don't think any continent would be safe during World War III, to be honest with you. I think the next major world war will likely be a biblical war, and the Bible's pretty clear that there will really be no place. People will be going to hide under the rocks and praying for the mountains to fall on top of them to hide, but it's going to be very tough because it's going to touch all points of the world in these days. And I hate to say that, but it's a fact. It's a biblical fact. Let's see. I am from Iraq, someone says, and the Euphrates River isn't drying up anytime soon. Well, the Bible has something to say about that. We'll see in the long term, but thanks for your comment. Let's see what else we have. North Korea, let me see here. Someone says the South Pole would be the safest place during World War III. More questions. Come on, let's bring them on here. Any more North Korea questions? Anyone have any considerations there about Kim Jong Un? I'm trying to, let's see. Okay. Sorry, guys, for delay. Have you met Chris Mitchell from Jerusalem Dateline over in Jerusalem? And will you guys unite for a Q&A someday soon? Does everyone out there know Chris Mitchell? He just happens to be one of my best friends, actually. So yes, Chris is a dear, dear friend, a mentor to me. So known him for many years from CBN News, Jerusalem Bureau Chief, dear, dear friend of mine. And we've done a lot on camera together. And we will do it once I get back to Israel. We will do it again very soon. I was supposed to go over Thanksgiving, as I shared with you here on the newscast, and that was canceled because Israel shut its borders once again to foreign travelers. I actually, a little teaser for you here. Do we have any Amir Sarfati fans out there? Behold Israel. I was supposed to link up with Amir on the Golan Heights to do some really cool stuff, and I could not make it. Obviously, the trip had to be postponed to a later date, but we were still able to interview Amir. My dear friend Mati Shoshani, our TBN Jerusalem correspondent, got together with Amir on the Golan, and you will be seeing that interview, I believe, next week, right here on the Watchman Newscast. And hopefully Amir and I will hook up in person soon. He's doing incredible work. If you haven't checked out Behold Israel here on YouTube, check it out. You will love the work Amir is doing. Great stuff. And he lives in Israel, of course. I believe Amir lives in the Galilee. I met him once in person a few years ago. We both spoke at Pastor Jack Hibbs' church, a great guy out in California. So Amir's a great guy. Check him out at Behold Israel and look for him here in the newscast next week. Okay. Have you heard anything about the new, it says graphing, and looks to me like it would be the mark of the beast? What does everyone think about the mark as we're kind of wrapping up here in a few minutes? The mark of the beast, what are your thoughts? My thoughts have been that we have the technology today, certainly the microchip technology. Sweden, and I think that's where that question was going, Sweden seems to be at the forefront of this microchip technology. Of all countries, Sweden, and the Swedes are kind of lining up to take those chips. So to me, I've always thought of the mark being a chip that would be placed under your skin. All your information's on there, your medical information, your statuses, your social security number, your bank account, all of it. And you go through the supermarket, you scan your hand, and there you go. I've always thought that would be one of it. Someone says here a hologram tattoo. That's an interesting take on it. But I've always thought that the chip and the mark would be a pretty good, or should I say a pretty bad match. But Sweden right now, really working on that technology of all places. And I think right now I turned 46 soon. I'm grizzled, man. But I guess I'm Generation X, my generation. I graduated high school in 94. But the generations below me, the millennials and Generation Z, these are generations. Talk about the generation. These are generations that, number one, love technology, and number two, love convenience. And you could see them saying, wait, you're telling me not only is this high tech, which is kind of cool, we love technology, we love our iPhones, everything else, but you're telling me I just need to put everything on this little chip, put it in my hand, and all I need to do is swipe, and that's it? That's so convenient. Please give it to me. I'll take it. I'll line up, give it to me. Especially when you think of the circumstances when that mark will be offered, which will be dire circumstances, and a very, shall we say, charismatic leader whose initials are AC. So we are living again in Bible times, to say the least, folks. That's why we're glad you were here with us on the Watchman Newscast live stream. Hey, the chat gets kind of interesting here. Some good stuff and some interesting stuff here, but hey, we're glad you're all here. We have thousands of people with us. Real quick, what would you like us to talk about on the Watchman Newscast? Not only we go deeper here on the live streams, obviously we can get into a lot of stuff that on the regular newscast we go for about 10 minutes, right? 10 to 12 minutes usually, but we go for an hour once a week on the live stream. Anything you would like me to get into, and keep it sane. Okay. Don't go off the beaten out in the reservation. Let's keep it on things that everyone's kind of interested in, and interesting stuff that I can actually comment on, something relevant. But if you have ideas, we love your ideas. Throw them out there. You're our not only our audience, you're shoulder to shoulder with us. As you can tell, I'm very fond of our Watchmen subscribers. As you can tell here in the live stream, I like to have some good times with you too, even though we're chatting about some serious stuff, but we have some laughs and we have a conversation here. We're having a Q&A, and I monitor the chat. So anything you would like to hear about, let me know, comment, send in on here on the live stream as well. I'm going to run now, sadly. But it was great being with you all again. Happy New Year to everyone. Here's a good one as we go. The Book of Enoch. What are your thoughts? Gosh, I have a copy of the Book of Enoch that I just ordered recently. The Nephilim, some fascinating stuff. Let's just say I'm delving into it. And I believe it is certainly some very important information in Enoch for another time, though. God bless you all. Until tomorrow here in the newscast, thanks for joining us. And remember, never hold your peace. Take care. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.